Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about over the past week. Except I don't really have too much to go over, except for I do want to let you know that I will be posting this content in an alternate form because I did just start experimenting with shorts. So I'm going to be putting this exact same list together, but all compacted into 60 seconds and posting that up at the same time as this one. So if you want to see this content a lot quicker or just hear me talk less, this is definitely a great option. I'm really interested to see how this pans out when I have 20 or 30 games to cover in a single short, but we'll figure that out once we get there. Other than that, I always do like to give a quick mention to Alex over at Board Game Co because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming games so that I can give you these lists every single week. But then Alex posts a video at the start of the month going over the heavy hitters for that month and letting you know what's to come. So if you do want to check that out, I will have a link to his channel in the description below. And if you are looking for even more content, especially focus more on war games and historical simulations, I definitely want to check out Zilla Blitz for all of his content, but also I do share my list with him as well so that he can dive into more details onto those games. But he also does have a few other sources of information because there's other crowdfunding platforms that do focus specifically on this genre of games, and he will be including that in his lists. I've mentioned it a few times, but I will be attending the Level Up event here in February. It's coming up real soon here. This is from February 2nd to the 4th, and this is going to be taking place in Woodbridge, New Jersey. So if you are in the area or if you're willing to come out, I'd definitely love to see you there. I'm happy to play games, and this is an excellent event if you just want to meet a ton of cool people in the industry and play a ton of games. But that's everything I have for an intro, and this is our first week of the year that is a legitimate full week of games, so let's go ahead and check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on January 14th, and this one's called Justice, and this plays 3 to 5 players and takes about 40 to 50 minutes to play. But this is a competitive game where players are going to be acting as the council of law. It's going to be up to the players to go through different crimes, with each of the crimes having 3 different suspects, and then the players are going to be collectively deciding whether or not each suspect is innocent or guilty. Of course, this may not always reflect reality, and it's for this reason that this game is also a bit of a hidden identity game, because each player is going to be dealt an identity at the start of the game, and you're going to be keeping the secret throughout the entirety of the game, but it pretty much determines what you want those final outcomes to be at the end of each round, where the philanthropist might want everyone to be acquitted whether or not they're guilty, and then the commissar will want everyone to be convicted, and then the other players may want to result in convicting the appropriate suspects or doing the complete opposite. The main board gets set up every single round with a random crime being put at the top, and then 3 suspects who are going to be tried for that crime. Whether or not those suspects actually committed the crime or not is going to be randomly determined by shuffling up a card and putting it face down underneath each of those suspects, and of course that will be revealed at the end of the round. But what's really interesting about this game is that it is a trick-taking game. The different cards that players have in their hand are going to have different suits that all represent different types of evidence. But the trump suit is going to be determined by whichever crime card is currently in play, so that will be changing from round to round. And the way that players get the cards into their hand for each round is that after all of this is set up, from what I've said so far, players will then be either dealt a hand of cards, or you could choose to draft a hand of cards depending on how you want to play the game. Trick-taking in this game works similarly to the traditional method of trick-taking, but with a few added changes. Players will have tokens that they'll be able to spend to skip a turn, allowing them to see another round of cards played before they decide what they want to play, or they could also instead play a token to try and look under one of the suspects to see which ones are actually innocent or guilty. But after all the players have passed, the winner is going to be determined by whoever played the highest card of the lead suit, or by playing the highest trump card if they didn't have that suit. And then the winner is going to be able to take one of the cards that they just won and then slide it either to the left-hand side or the right-hand side of one of the suspects. This is going to determine how that suspect is tried, because at the end of the round, you're going to be adding up all the values on the left-hand side and all the values on the right-hand side, and then comparing the two, and whichever side is higher is going to be determining whether or not that suspect is found innocent or guilty. There is also some icon matching you can do as well to add additional values onto that total, but that's essentially how the game works. Within a round, players are going to be playing several tricks until one of the players completely runs out of cards, and then that's going to be triggering the end of the round. And then all the suspects are going to be resolved, and the card underneath them is going to be revealed, so you can see which ones were actually guilty or innocent. And then the outcome of that is going to determine whether or not you score victory points for that suspect, depending on your identity card that you got at the start of the game. But there is another layer to this game that makes it even more fun, because not only can you put cards to the left or right of each suspect when you're playing those tricks, but there's also a card that you can put either above or below the suspect, which is going to be adding certain icons to that card, which can increase the victory points you get if you do score for that particular suspect. The icons that you're going to get are also going to be determined by your identity card, so you'll want to check your identity card to see which icons score best for you. The game's played over several rounds, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game, and if this one sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. And launching on January 16th, we have Spire's and Rangitaki, and this is a solo game that takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play, and this one is the third in the series of the Spire's End games, with the first one being more focused on a darker and more mature theme, but also introducing the universe that all these games take place in. The next entry focused more on one of the characters from that universe, known as Hildegard, and it followed her story and her background within this universe, and it also introduced a more vibrant artwork that is carried forward into this newer entry. In this entry, players are going to be following the story of Rangitaki, who's desperate to escape from her home that was raided by mysterious enemies. Players are going to be moving through a deck of tarot-sized cards, with each of these cards offering different options, whether it's navigational options or story choices, while other cards might present different challenges that can also set you down different paths, or even throw you into different encounters, and even give you opportunities to gain new items or interact with different events. If you're familiar with the previous games, this one does play more similarly to Spire's and Hildegard, and I did cover that one in the past, and I will also share that previous footage for you if you do want to be up to date with how that game plays and how it differs from this one. But in this game, you will be managing a few different stats, and you'll be able to use those to try and augment your rolls depending on the different challenges that you run into, because you're going to be rolling a die anytime that you want to take on a challenge or anytime that you're forced to take on a challenge. And this game does allow a few different ways for you to manipulate your rolls to tip the scales in your favor, but of course, investing in those specific skills for that challenge are going to set you up for a better outcome. You're always moving forward in this game no matter what happens, so whatever the outcome is, it's going to be sending you down a different arc. So even if you play this game over again and have different outcomes to your challenges or make different decisions, you're going to have a very different ending. The game plays over a few different decks, with each of those representing a different chapter in the story, and players will be using action points throughout the game in order to heal their health, influence their rolls, and even perform some bonus actions. Players start the game with 7 action points, but you don't want to spend these too quickly because they only get reset after an encounter. There are some ways to get more action points through the decisions or outcomes of the challenges that you face, but generally you're going to be going into an encounter with the action points that you were able to save, and it always starts on your turn, so if you saved more action points, you're going to be able to do more in your initial turn, which hopefully results in you taking less damage and getting through that encounter safely and as quickly as possible. But something that is unique about this edition of the game is that when you do enter into an encounter, you actually are going to be using this encounter board, which does add a spatial element into the game. This is not something that was a part of the previous entries, so this one will be playing a little bit different than all the others. The action board can have different enemies and terrain taking up the different slots within the board for the player to interact with. Within an encounter, it's always going to be alternating between the player and the enemy, always starting with the player's turn first, and like I said, you want to save as many action points as you can to get a really good jump on your opponent, but after the enemy's turn, you always do get your action points reset, and you're going to be using them to do different things like use your weapons, which can have different action point costs as well as a different amount of damage or number of targets that they can hit, and then you will also be rolling a die in order to determine if that is a critical hit or possibly a complete miss. Like I said, the game does offer a few different ways for you to modify your rolls, but that usually involves spending some sort of resource, so although you can have some control over the encounter, it is going to come at a cost and possibly put you in a worse situation in the future if you spend too many of your resources. As always, if you are interested in this one, I will have a link to the campaign in the description below and you can check it out to see even more details, but if you are interested to know exactly how Hildegard played, I'll just go ahead and roll my previous footage for you now. And this is a standalone card game adventure set in the world of Spire's End, which tells the story of Hildegard, the main player from the first game. And in this prequel, you've been tasked with delivering a mysterious package, and rumors are running rampant about what you're carrying. Along the way, you'll encounter dodgy townsfolk, wild critters, and natural disasters, but it won't be all bad, as you can enjoy the outdoors with some fishing, hunting, foraging, and maybe a little riverboating along the way. Spire's End uses a choose-your-own-adventure mechanism where cards will present some choices that players can make. Each decision will guide you to a specific numbered card in the deck, and all the cards between that number and your current card get discarded for the next time that you play. As the story progresses, decisions become more involved, as you may need to pull cards out of order or choose between duplicates of the same card number. You'll also discover items along the way, and the items you've discovered can also modify the outcomes of your choices. Encounters are settled with dice rolls and dice mitigation, and defeating your enemies will take you down one path, while a loss will result in a completely different story arc. If you're lucky, you'll see your opponent before they spot you and be able to take them out with a distance with your trusty slingshot. A neat aspect of this game is that it can also be played as a co-op where the second player takes control of Helvig, Hildegard's younger sister. In this mode, players make choices, shoot targets, and face off against enemies together, with an additional mechanism added to the combat to involve both players. Also launching on the 16th, we have a couple new expansions coming out for the Conan game offered by Monolith, and this is a game that launched several years back, and there's quite a lot of content out for this game now, including a bunch of different ways that you can play the game, but this is a game that plays 2 to 5 players, with up to 4 players playing as a cooperative experience, and then 1 player playing as the Overlord, controlling all the enemies. Like I said, there is quite a lot of content out for this game already, so be careful if you go to check out their campaign, but if you are interested in a purely cooperative experience, this is a scenario game, and there was a few fully cooperative scenarios offered in a previous expansion. But if you're not familiar with this game, you're going to be choosing one of those scenarios and then setting up the main play area according to that scenario. This would mean setting up the map, which can use various boards and tiles, and then also setting up any of the starting characters or items out on those boards. Of course, each of these scenarios will have their own little backstory associated with them, and also different goals and objectives for both the cooperative players or the Overlord to try and achieve. There are a whole bunch of different characters in this game to play as, and the heroes are going to be choosing one of those characters and taking the associated board along with it. The way this game works is that you're going to be using energy cubes in order to perform any actions on your turn. At the start of your turn, you're going to be deciding whether you want to be in an active state or in a rest state, and depending on what you choose, it's going to limit the actions that are available to you, but it's also going to determine how much of your energy is returned. The different actions will allow you to move around on the board, defend or attack in different ways, or even interact with different elements out in the environment. There's also different items and gear that you can collect as well to help you along the way. And like I said, the Overlord player is going to be controlling all of the enemies out on the board, but the way that they do that is with a similar mechanism of using their energy cubes, but their turn is going to work a little bit different because they're going to be able to activate 2 different groups of enemies on their turn. The way that they do this is by activating one of the cards in this row at the bottom of their board, with the leftmost cards being the easiest to activate, because the further you go to the right of the board, the more costly those cards are going to be. But anytime that you choose to activate one of these cards, you're going to be able to activate each of the enemies that are a part of that group. Once you do that, that card's going to move to the most right-hand side of the board, pushing all the other cards 1 space to the left. Unlike with the heroes, where all their actions are specified on their hero board, with the enemies, the actions are actually going to be specified on their enemy cards, so depending on which enemies you activate, you can actually have very different actions available to you. But the game continues like this, alternating between the hero hero's turns and the overlord until one of them is able to complete their win condition, winning the game. Like I said, this campaign's going to be offering a few new additions to the game, but if you don't own anything already, if you're interested in some of the previous content, some of that will be available in this campaign as well. But the two main expansions offered in this game is the Red Nails expansion, which is going to be exploring new areas and characters in the game. And it's going to be introducing new terrain that has more rivers and vegetation and cliffs, offering key vantage points on each of the maps, but also making movement and ranged attacks more difficult while simultaneously making melee combat a little bit more advantageous in some situations. Second expansion is essentially adding a new way for you to play the game, which is a versus mode where you're going to be able to draft characters and then fight against each other, much like they offered in the Batman Gotham City Chronicles campaign. If you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below, and of course you can click to get notified. Also launching on the 16th, we have Metrorunner, and this plays 1 to 5 players and takes about 30 to 90 minutes to play. And this one is a competitive game that takes place in a cyberpunk world where the corporations have taken over. Players are going to be starting with their own unique characters that each have their own strengths and weaknesses that you'll be able to grow and explore throughout the game. But essentially you're going to be collecting intel and completing jobs and fulfilling contracts against 5 different districts. You'll be able to use any resources that you gain in order to gain upgrades and grow your influence in order to win the game. The main board is going to be broken into these 5 districts, but this is the main area where you're going to be taking your actions using a bit of a rondel system, because each character is going to have a token out on the board representing their character, and on your turn you'll be able to move that token up to 2 spaces for free and then take the action that you land on. One thing to note here is that you can spend some of your resources to move further around on the rondel. When you do stop on a location, you can take either the district action, which is normally going to be giving you some amount of resources that are usually accumulating until somebody does take them, or you could take the specific action that you landed on within that district. These different actions could also gain you some different types of resources, or could allow you to claim job cards that you can try to complete in order to convert resources into other resources, or into actions, or even victory points. But the other action that's available through these spaces is to hack the network, and anytime that you do this, you'll be able to make 2 manipulations to the puzzle in the middle of the board, and essentially what you're trying to do is manipulate that puzzle in various ways in order to match it up with one of the requirements of the 2 mission cards that can be found above it. Whenever you're able to do this, you'll be able to gain all sorts of different benefits like resources, victory points, or even reputation that will move you up the reputation track, which essentially acts like a bit of an engine, multiplying the amount of resources or benefits that you get when you do perform a particular action. But one of the main ways that players will be trying to score victory points in this game is through these victory point condition cards that are going to be variable from game to game. These will provide some different requirements that players will try to fulfill in order to gain those victory points, and of course the player who has the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, I will have it linked down below, and of course you can click to get notified. And the next campaign we have is also launching on the 16th, and this one is called Imposters, and this is a party game for up to 20 players, and it is a bluffing game where players are going to be trying to compete to collect the most donuts, either by telling the truth or deceiving their opponents. This is a game that I just found out about before filming this video, and I did try to find more information on it, but they don't have a BGG page, and also the website I was provided doesn't actually work for me. So if you do want to know more about this game, definitely check out the campaign, and I will have that linked in the description below. Also launching on the 16th, we have Among Cultists, a social deduction thriller, and this plays 4 to 8 players. It takes about 45 to 90 minutes to play, and this one looks like a excellent choice if you are into deduction games, but you want something with a little bit more meat than something like Werewolf. But in this game, players are essentially playing on one of 2 teams, the cultists or the investigators, and the cultists will know who the other cultists are, but the investigators don't know who's on their team and who isn't, and they're going to have to use deduction to try and figure that out, except for one player who will be known as the Seer, who has complete information, but if the cultists are ever able to point out who the Seer is, then the investigators immediately lose. The cultists can also win the game by eliminating enough of the investigators, but the investigators win the game by either exposing the cultists or stopping the ritual by gathering all of the tomes from each of the rooms in the game. Unlike a lot of other deduction games, this one does actually have a spatial element to it, as players will be moving their characters through different rooms and taking various actions. Players can also say anything they want at any time, they just can never show their cards, and players can be dead or alive, but you always act alive until it's revealed that you're not. If it is revealed that you are a dead player, then you still continue to play the game, but you play it as a ghost, which is going to limit some of the actions that you can take, but it also gives you some other advantages as well. After the board's set up according to the scenario, players are going to be taking turns performing their actions on their turn, but at the start of the round, every player is going to be able to perform a movement action, and then there's going to be an event card drawn. And if you're ever in a room with one other player, meaning that there's just two players in a room, no witnesses, then each of the players are going to be choosing a dead or alive card from their hand and putting it down in front of the other player. The thing here is that the investigators only have alive cards, whereas the cultists have both dead and alive cards in their hand, which means that if these do get revealed at some point in the future and you discover that there is a dead card in that stack, then it's most likely that one of the characters that gave you a card is a cultist. The reason that I say it's most likely that one of them is the cultist and not for sure is because each player does also start with one card already in the stack, so you might already be a ghost at the start of the game without even knowing it. If there's more than two people in a room, then this doesn't happen unless the lights also happen to be turned off, and in that case, every player is going to be giving every other player a dead or alive card in the same manner, and there's different events and actions that can be taken in order to cut or reinitiate the power into the mansion. These events can also have some other effects like opening up new actions and possibilities to the players, or even opening up different pathways for players to move through different sections of the mansion a little bit easier. But after all the players have performed their movement and the event card's been drawn, each player is then going to be able to take turns performing one action. And one of the actions that you can perform is to check if another player is alive or dead. Whenever you do that, you're going to be looking at the stack of cards in front of them. And then if there is any dead cards in that stack, then that player is dead. And if you're an investigator, you have to reveal this truthfully to everyone at the table, and then that player will become a ghost. But if you're a cultist, you are allowed to lie about this and allow all the players at the table to continue playing, believing that that player is still alive. Anytime that a player is revealed to be dead, players are each going to have a blind vote where you're going to be closing your eyes and then pointing at someone that you want to eliminate from the game. You are also allowed to withhold your vote and not point at anyone, but if enough people are pointing at a particular player, then that player is eliminated. But some of the other actions you can perform is your character-specific action, or alternatively the room action, because each room is going to have a different action associated with it, and you can just go ahead and perform that action. But there are some other actions that you can perform when you are in a room as well, and these apply to all of the rooms in the game, because like I said, it's the investigator's goal to try and collect each of the tomes from each of the different rooms in order to try and stop the ritual of the cultists. But in order to do that, you need to fully explore the room and then succeed in finding the tome. And the way that this works is that in order for a room to be considered fully explored is for that stack of cards associated with that room to have 3 cards in it. In order to make that happen, when a player is in a room, they can perform the action to add a card to that stack. And if you are an investigator, you're only going to be adding success cards to that stack. But if you're a cultist, you can add other cards like failures or even a sabotage. But regardless of which cards and who's adding them to the stack, once that stack gets to 3 cards, then players can try to succeed in finding the tome. And the way that that works is that you're going to be performing an action to do this. You're going to be taking the stack of cards associated with that room, shuffling it up, and then drawing one of those cards. And if it's a success, then you're going to be taking that room's tome and adding it to your library. But if it's a failure, then you're going to be doing nothing. But if it's a sabotage, you're actually going to be taking one of the tomes out of your library and putting it back into one of the rooms. So I think you can start to see how the deduction comes into play, with the cultists being the only ones able to use death cards, as well as sabotage and failure cards. So as those start appearing in different decks in the game, this is going to start making players suspect which other players might be a cultist. Of course, that is easier said than done because the cultists can also act like they're an investigator because they do have access to those cards as well. But the game continues like this until one of those win conditions are met, and then that team wins the game. And if you are interested in this one, definitely check it out. I'll have it linked in the description below. Also launching on the 16th, we have a flip and write print and play that is called Night. And this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 60 minutes to play. And I couldn't completely figure out how this game plays, and I couldn't find any other information on it, so I'll just let you know what I could gather from the BGG page. And that's that this game's going to be offering a bunch of different scenarios for players to play, with each of them offering some different win and loss conditions. But the game just plays over 2 rounds, with each round having 6 cards being drawn, and that's going to be determining the resources and actions available for the players. Every 3 turns, there's going to be a goal card revealed, which is going to be giving some rewards and penalties for players that are able to achieve that goal. And I assume that's going to be one of the main ways to score victory points in this game, but unfortunately there's just not a whole lot of information on this one right now, so if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked in the description below. And of course, if it hasn't launched yet, you can click that notify me button to get notified once it does. And launching on the 18th, we have Blood Throne, the Tower of Sacrifice. And this plays 1 to 7 players and takes about 60 to 120 minutes to play. And this one is a cooperative narrative campaign game that takes place in a dark fantasy world. And this is another one that I don't have a whole lot of information on, but players are going to be discovering the map as they play the game, placing stickers out on it as they discover clues and new opportunities and quests that they can explore. And players will each be playing as their own unique character with different strengths and weaknesses that you can upgrade throughout the game. The monsters in this game have different strengths and abilities, and they're going to be behaving according to a flowchart located on the back of their cards, but players are essentially going to be playing through the campaign, making different decisions, and fighting monsters along the way in order to level themselves up, discover new items, and hopefully win the game. And if you are interested to learn more about this one, you can find the link in the description below. And that's everything for this week, but don't leave yet because we still got a couple awesome giveaways to announce, and these are the easiest giveaways to enter ever. All you got to do is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like or subscribe or do anything like that, although I do appreciate it if you do think I deserve it. But the first giveaway we have is for a pledge for Omerta, the 5 Families. And this is a competitive game where players will be playing as different mob bosses as they control their crew and deploy them out on different areas of the map in order to gain income through extortion, increase their presence in the different regions on the board, and even start some legitimate businesses as well. Players will be using their income to bribe the police in order to put more focus on their opponents, or even bribe different news outlets in order to increase their reputation. Having a high respect in this game means that you get to go first in the turn order, which can be very strategic, especially when you're trying to take control of different areas. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe edition of the game, which is going to get you everything in the standard edition as well as some really nice premium upgrades. Like I said, all you got to do to enter this giveaway is leave a comment down below, and you can say anything that you want, but just make sure to leave the hashtag boss in it, and that'll get you entered into this giveaway. And the next giveaway we have is for a pledge for a game that I actually missed covering in a previous episode, but the creator was kind enough to still offer up a pledge for giveaway, and this looks like a really interesting party game, and this one is called Drawn Together. And the way this works is that players are going to be given a sheet of paper with different areas that can be colored in, and one player is going to be trying to draw one thing, for example a heart, while the other player is going to be trying to draw something else, for example a skull. Players are going to be taking turns drawing in different areas of the sheet using any color that they want, and this is where the strategy comes into play, because you could use the same color as the color your opponent used to try and blend what you colored in with what they colored in order to change what they did into something else. Or maybe you want to use a different color to create a segregation between the colors so that your opponent can't do that to you. This continues until the entire page is colored in, and then a third player is going to be deciding what it looks more like. Whatever that is going to be determining which player wins that round. And this giveaway is going to be for the sponsor, a game sheet pledge, where you're going to be able to work with the designers and suggest 2 different objects to use for one of these game sheets, and then they will include that in the game along with your name or alias that you want to go as for the inspiration of that drawing. And just like with the previous giveaway, just leave a comment down below to enter into this one as well, and just make sure to leave the hashtag draw, but then also leave your suggestion of which 2 objects you would like to see compared on a single sheet within this game. I'll draw the winners for both of these giveaways at the end of next week's episode, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that if you are entering into this giveaway, or if you just want to see more content like this, and I truly do appreciate it. But that's everything I have for you this week, but as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope this content was helpful, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.